A sunlit canyon cradled dreamers chasing freedom, where guitars echoed through groves, lovers talked under oaks, and every night felt endless. Yet behind that golden haze lurked a darker current, a cocktail of substances, swinging morals, and secrets that would shatter this bohemian Eden. In the shadow of velvet hills, wild abandon morphed into tragedy, and the very sanctuary that birthed legends became a stage for its undoing. But how did a few barefoot visionaries and midnight sculptors ignite a wildfire of rebellion that would seduce and later scorch the soul of a generation? Seeds of rebellion. In the early 1960s, a restless tide of young musicians and artists drifted into the hills above Hollywood, seeking refuge from suburban sameness and post-war norms. They carried acoustic guitars, sketchpads filled with half-scribbled lyrics, and a fierce longing for a life free of 9-to-5 routines. By 1963, Vito Polekis, an ex-marathon dancer turned sculptor, opened an art studio at 303 North Laurel Avenue, offering clay modeling lessons by day and late-night gatherings that doubled as free-form dance classes by night. Alongside him, Carl Franzoni, nicknamed Captain F, assembled a ragtag troupe of freaks whose wild moves and open sexuality were inappropriate on the Sunset Strip. In packed clubs like the Whiskey A Go-Go, their ecstatic freakouts invited onlookers to scream at the ceiling, smear whipped cream on each other, or join trapeze-like dance circles under strobing lights. Word of this bohemian experiment spread quickly, drawing talents like Joni Mitchell and David Crosby into small cabins tucked among eucalyptus groves, where rent was cheap and the only rule was collaboration. Jim Morrison of The Doors found inspiration in a stone cottage on Rothdale Trail, later immortalized in his song Love Street, while overlooking the glittering city lights below. Chris Hillman of The Byrds rented a wooden house near Lookout Mountain. Its panoramic view fueled the country rock edge on tracks like So You Want to Be a Rock and Roll Star. In 1967, Jackson Browne left New York's Greenwich Village folk clubs and settled into a canyon bungalow, lured by midnight jams and moonlit songwriting circles. By mid-decade, Laurel Canyon's narrow switchbacks and dirt roads linked a humming hive of creativity, where albums were born and band lineups shifted as casually as the wind. Frank Zappa converted the old log cabin on Lookout Mountain into a rehearsal space for the mothers of invention, hosting all-night freakouts that melded acid trips and avant-garde jams into a new musical frontier. Arthur Lee of Love and manager-producer Kim Fowley cut early demos in Polekis' studio, blending psychedelic folk into the canyon's soundscape. This fusion of folk, rock, jazz, and country, underpinned by free love and LSD experiments, made the canyon the epicenter of America's next musical revolution. Linda Ronstadt, Graham Nash, and Stephen Stills found kindred spirits in the hills before forming Crosby, Stills, and Nash in 1968, their close harmonies echoing through the pines. Sessions in Jackson Browne's place gave birth to the Eagles, whose blend of country twang and rock swagger would define California country rock. Painters, poets, and amateur philosophers joined the mix too, debating politics and higher consciousness under sun-dappled redwoods. Yet, beneath this creative bloom lurked darker currents. Smoke soon gave way to and binges that blurred pleasure with peril. Open-door policies welcomed wandering vagabonds, some gifted, some desperate, turning free-flow parties into hotspots for dealers and addicts. Residents began to grumble about noise, litter, and trespassing, especially after a 1966 Santa Ana windstorm blew sparks from a late-night jam into Chris Hillman's rented wooden home, igniting it fully. Law enforcement viewed the gatherings as ticking time bombs and started targeting outdoor circus freakouts for raids. Despite the crackdown, more artists arrived each season, fueled by rumors of secret jams and the chance to live among peers who spoke in chords instead of words. For a brief, electric moment, Laurel Canyon was a self-sustaining dream, ground broken by folk rock harmonies, shaped by smoky mornings and starlit nights, and stitched together by friendships sealed over shared chords. But as brush fires raged and substance scares mounted, the first cracks appeared in this idealistic enclave. Those seeds of rebellion that once bore golden fruit hinted at an inevitable reckoning. The free love dream was about to collide with a harsher reality. But just as the dream began to fray, something strange happened. Those caught in the chaos didn't flee. Instead, they huddled closer, creating a hidden world where creativity thrived in the ashes of unraveling innocence. Canyon Commune. Hidden among eucalyptus and sycamore trees, Laurel Canyon became a tight-knit community where musicians, artists, and free thinkers lived like family. Small cottages and hillside bungalows were traded for song ideas and guitar strings more often than money. Neighbors shared food, swapped instruments, and dropped in unannounced for midnight jam sessions that sometimes lasted until dawn. At the heart of this commune were figures like Joni Mitchell, who moved into a cabin and welcomed fellow songwriters to test new melodies on her porch. David Crosby and Graham Nash turned their adjacent homes into creative laboratories, where harmonies were refined. Nearby, Jackson Browne's space became a rehearsal hall for the Eagles before they ever recorded in a studio. This loose network extended beyond music. Painters set up easels under redwood canopies, while poets gathered around lantern light to exchange verses. At Polekas's studio on North Laurel Avenue, clay modeling and dance workshops introduced newcomers to the canyon's DIY spirit. No one asked for rent. Instead, residents offered artistic contributions or labor on shared gardens and outdoor stages. Daily life in the canyon blended art with survival. A handful of corner markets supplied fresh produce, but most meals were potluck-style, with burritos rolled on kitchen counters, bowls of vegetable stew ladled on picnic benches, and communal fruit baskets left at front doors. Water rationing during summer droughts forced everyone to coordinate shower schedules. In winter, small wood-burning stoves filled rooms with smoke and the smell of pine logs as musicians passed around homemade chili to keep warm. Despite the camaraderie, tensions simmered. Sleep-deprived songwriters sometimes clashed over noise. Late-night drum circles rattled windows of more reserved neighbors, and open-door policies invited unvetted drifters whose motives were not always pure. Arguments flared over missing instruments or spilt drinks, yet disputes often dissolved when someone started playing a familiar riff or offered a fresh pot of coffee. The canyon's informal council met under a tall maple tree in Willow Glen. Decisions were made by consensus: whether to host a public concert, locate a dealer in need of business, or divert the county sheriff's patrol away from jam-filled backyards. These gatherings epitomized the communal ethos. Occasionally, newcomers brought gossip from the city below, warning that record executives were scouting properties or that pop-up radio stations planned to broadcast live from the canyon floor. The commune's success began to draw attention. Hollywood insiders and the press dubbed it the Canyon Commune, and guided tours began winding over dirt roads. Fans packed into Beatlesque fan vans, eager to glimpse their favorite musicians sprawled on weathered porches. To locals, these visitors felt intrusive, but many residents saw opportunity. a chance to build audiences without leaving home. Even as the commune thrived, deeper risks loomed. Communal trust made it easy for dealers to infiltrate circle jerk gatherings, and passed hand to hand, accelerating both creative breakthroughs and personal breakdowns. At midnight, the doors stayed open, so no one felt alone, and no one stayed safe. Yet despite the dangers, the Canyon Commune embodied an ideal: art born from collective energy and daily life lived as an endless creative act. In its brief golden age, Laurel Canyon's commune proved that a handful of cabins could create cultural revolutions. Songs written on worn-out couches became chart-topping hits. Paintings sketched on napkins found homes in gallery windows. Under towering oaks and redwoods, strangers became bandmates, neighbors became family, and a hidden pocket of Los Angeles gleamed with possibility until the outside world closed in. Freakout fever. Freakouts erupted when Vito Paulicas and Carl Franzoni first led wild, free-form dance sessions that blurred art and rebellion on the Sunset Strip in the early 1960s. These performances, often held at clubs, invited onlookers to scream, dance, and even smear whipped cream on one another under flickering strobe lights. Frank Zappa, captivated by the chaos, invited Paulicas's troupe on stage during Mothers of Invention shows, fusing acid-tinged improvisation with avant-garde theater. By 1965, that same electric energy had moved into Laurel Canyon's hills, where Zappa converted an old log cabin near Lookout Mountain into a rehearsal space and freakout haven. Inside the rustic cabin, guitars lay open in corners, waiting for anyone, friend or stranger, to join impromptu jam sessions that stretched through the night. And flowed alongside coffee and cigarettes, creating a sensory marathon that pushed participants toward both creative breakthroughs and dangerous exhaustion. Poets and painters joined musicians in eucalyptus groves, trading verses and brushstrokes as beats echoed off canyon walls. Joni Mitchell later recalled scribbling lyrics by lantern light before a freakout and witnessing them transform into songs as dawn's glow crept over the ridges. David Crosby described his first canyon freakout as a mind-opening ritual that changed his approach to harmony and improvisation. Photographer Henry Diltz documented these scenes, capturing spinning dancers crowned with flowers and guitars strung beneath moonlit pines. Those grainy images would become iconic symbols of the 1960s spirit of freedom and communal creation. Stephen Stills and Graham Nash improvised early Crosby, Stills and Nash harmonies during one such gathering, unaware that their midnight experiment would soon redefine folk rock. As word spread, informal door fee systems arose. Hats passed through sweaty crowds funded snacks, extra record needles, and paint for communal murals painted on porch railings. However, the open-door policy also allowed opportunists and dealers to join the parties, selling high-dose LSD and amphetamines to fuel the frenzy. Some attendees arrived seeking inspiration, but left with psychotic breaks or no memory of the night's events. Residents began to complain about relentless drums and laughter that shook wooden cabins until dawn. Landlords feared that spilt beer and unattended fires would damage aging floorboards and electrical systems. The county sheriff increased patrols along back roads and occasionally raided dawn gatherings, seizing narcotics and arresting stragglers. Despite the risks, many musicians defended freakouts as essential to their craft, insisting no studio session could replicate the spark of communal creation felt under the stars. Linda Ronstadt later said that the honesty she found in those nights taught her to sing with newfound vulnerability. Painters splashed vibrant murals on porch railings, inspired by the chaotic joy of free-form dance circles. Critics conceded that the canyon's freakouts produced some of the era's most memorable music and art. As acid dosages climbed and exhaustion set in, signs of breakdown and burnout began to surface among regulars. Dancers collapsed from dehydration, and others wandered off, disoriented, into dawn's haze, blurring the line between ecstatic release and dangerous obsession. For a moment, freakouts fueled Laurel Canyon's creativity and community like nothing else. But beneath that fevered glow lay the seeds of tragedies that would soon darken its sunlit dreams. But as the music soared and cameras flashed, something darker stirred beneath the fame. Was all this beauty built on a foundation destined to collapse? Highs and lows. By 1968, Laurel Canyon's music was everywhere. Joni Mitchell released Song to a Seagull, capturing the wind-swept freedom of canyon life. Crosby, Stills, and Nash debuted with tight harmonies that echoed from the Hollywood Bowl to Woodstock. The Eagles began recording demos, soon landing a record deal that would skyrocket their country rock sound onto radio waves. Success felt boundless as songwriters celebrated chart hits and full concerts. At the same time, the Canyon's film and fashion circles buzzed with crossovers. Michelle Phillips of the Mamas and the Papas posed for magazine covers in flowing dresses under redwood canopies. Photographers like Henry Diltz captured candid moments of Graham Nash laughing by his guitar, and David Crosby's thoughtful gaze framed by sunlit leaves. These images cemented the canyon's legend and lured more creatives into its fold. Romance thrived in the hills. Graham Nash and Joni Mitchell carried on a brief affair that fueled lyrics for both artists. Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham first crossed paths at a canyon party, sparking a partnership that would define Fleetwood Mac's golden era. Couples locked hands on porch swings and sang song verses late into the night. Love and music intertwined as easily as vines on the canyon walls. Record labels flocked to sign canyon acts, bringing good news and cold contracts. The influx of money built home studios and hired engineers, letting musicians record without leaving their nests. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers even set up equipment in a rented cabin, mixing tracks by lantern light. Success gave many the freedom to experiment, and albums like Love's Forever Changes showed how far the canyon sound could expand. Despite that, alongside triumphs came darker days. Judy Sill, whose haunting melodies held the promise of greatness, struggled with addiction and isolation. After a troubled childhood and failed tours, she died of an overdose, her final album gaining appreciation only posthumously. Janis Joplin returned briefly to Canyon Hills before her overdose in 1970, leaving friends stunned at how quickly joy turned to tragedy. Jim Morrison's late-night visits to canyon homes shifted from poetic talks to erratic rages. His bandmates recalled broken furniture and frantic phone calls, where he swore he saw visions. Before long, Morrison moved away, his unpredictable behavior and battles with alcohol marking another fall from grace. Substance use and mental strain wore down others too. Stephen Stills admitted years later that binges left him unable to write songs without crashing weeks afterwards. David Crosby's open experiments brought early inspiration, but later spiraled into paranoia and legal troubles. Some houses that once echoed with laughter became sites of quiet despair, where musicians lay awake staring at ceiling cracks. As real estate values soared, the canyon lost its cheap charm. Multi-million-dollar homes replaced cheap bungalows, and longtime residents found themselves priced out. The easy camaraderie of potluck dinners and shared tape runs gave way to locked gates and security cameras. Few newcomers knew the stories behind the walls they bought. By the early 1970s, the dream was fading. Harmonic bliss gave way to lawsuits over song credits. Fires sparked in dry brush during raucous gatherings reminded everyone how fragile these wooden cabins could be. The Manson slayings nearby deepened fears, casting a long shadow over canyon roads. Still, the highs and lows shaped music history. Songs written amid sunlit mornings and shadowed nights became classics. The canyon's rise and fall proved that creativity can light up whole worlds, but also burn them down if left unchecked. Blood in the Hills. In the summer of 1969, a brutal act of violence pierced Laurel Canyon's free-spirited calm. On the night of August 9th, followers of Charles Manson broke into Sharon Tate's home on Cielo Drive and slaughtered the actress along with 4 friends, leaving grisly messages scrawled in blood on the walls. Less than 24 hours later, the same group invaded the Los Feliz home of Leno and Rosemary LaBianca, slaying the couple and carving further symbols into their flesh. News of the Tate-LaBianca slayings spread across the hills like wildfire, turning the canyon's hidden retreats into crime scenes and shattering the sense of safety that had drawn artists there. Before those nights, Laurel Canyon had been a haven for musicians and painters seeking freedom. Neighbors swapped guitar strings and spaghetti recipes under redwood canopies, and jam sessions continued until dawn. After the slayings, porch lights burned late into the night, and doors remained bolted at dusk. Jam circles shrank from open-door parties to small groups meeting only by invitation in locked cabins. Rumors circulated that the slayers had scouted canyon roads and peered through backyard windows before choosing their targets. Though some accounts remain unverified, the fear felt by residents was real and immediate. Artists talked of strangers appearing at their gates, asking odd questions, or loitering near fences. The carefree atmosphere of shared meals and midnight revelry gave way to hushed talks over mugs of coffee on gated porches. The county sheriff's department ramped up patrols on narrow switchbacks, and deputies began conducting dawn raids on any house with reports of late-night activity. Several minor suspects were shortly detained, though most were released for lack of evidence linking them directly to the slayings. The police presence felt both reassuring and oppressive, as writers and painters worried that any noise could bring armed officers crashing through their doors. Record labels and journalists descended on the canyon, hungry for details about how such horror could erupt in this peaceful enclave. Photographers recreated the bloody messages on vacant door frames for glossy spreads, reinforcing the idea that Laurel Canyon's bohemian dream had become a nightmare stage. Tabloid headlines proclaimed that the Canyon of Love was now a canyon stained with blood. Yet, amid the terror, many artists turned their fear into music and memoir. Jackson Browne's unreleased demos from late 1969 carry an indication of mourning, while the lyrics of a Crosby, Stills and Nash track from that year tremble with sudden sorrow. Poets penned elegies for lost friends and drifting ideals. Small house concerts shifted from carefree dances to benefit events, raising funds for security gates and legal fees. As autumn came, the first rains washed away the worst of the bloodstains, but the emotional scars remained. Open-air gatherings by bonfire light became rarer, replaced by candlelit songwriting circles in locked living rooms. Newcomers were vetted carefully, introduced by trusted neighbors who spoke a password or shared a forgotten melody. Laurel Canyon would eventually reclaim some of its creative vigor. As years went by, new stars emerged and albums recorded in the hills rose to the charts. But the memory of those 2 nights lingered like a whisper among the pines. The same hills that once echoed with laughter and guitar chords now held a solemn silence, a reminder that unchecked freedom can be pierced by tragedy, and that even the most idyllic hideaway must guard its doors against the darkest impulses of the world beyond. But as Laurel Canyon tried to heal, an even darker shadow crept in from the edges. What if the dream hadn't just unraveled, but had been marked for vengeance all along? Shadows of Manson. Long before the summer of 1969, Charles Manson wandered through Los Angeles, hungry for a music career he never found. He auditioned his folk songs for producer Terry Melcher at the Cielo Drive house, hoping to land a record deal. When Melcher turned him away, Manson carried resentment into the hidden corners of Hollywood. Manson's bitter failure gave way to darker ambitions. He gathered followers at Spahn Ranch and began teaching them to obey his every word. Yet, he never forgot the canyon hills where he had once sought fame. He studied winding roads and quiet driveways, noting which homes glowed brightest at night. By mid-1969, Manson's family had visions of retribution. They crept through Laurel Canyon lanes, testing fences, and peering into windows. They believed that attacking people tied to the music world would send shockwaves through Hollywood. When they struck at the Tate home, they painted blood messages on doors and walls, turning private sanctuaries into public crime scenes. The next night, the same slayers moved on to the La Bianca house. They carved sinister symbols into flesh and furniture, sealing their reign of terror. News of these slayings raced across the canyon, snuffing out open-door gatherings and midnight jam sessions. A place once alive with laughter went silent under a veil of fear. After those nights, every porch light stayed on until dawn. Musicians who once left doors unlocked now carried keys and flashlights. Small groups replaced large parties. Friends tested newcomers with questions before inviting them in. The sense of shared trust evaporated almost overnight. Songwriters felt the shadow in every chord they played. Acoustic guitars in living rooms sounded hollow. Lyrics that once celebrated freedom turned somber. Recording sessions slowed to a crawl as artists glanced at each other, unsure who they could truly trust. Even the brightness of daylight felt tainted by memory. Communal meals at Paulekes' studio gave way to private dinners. Painters who once splashed porch railings in wild colors now worked alone in locked garages. Informal councils under the big maple tree dissolved as everyone feared spies among them. The canyon's legendary warmth turned into cautious distance. Law enforcement flooded canyon roads with patrol cars. Deputies parked at intersections and questioned any gathering larger than 3 people. Occasional dawn raids on suspected houses rattled windows and nerves alike. Some residents welcomed the police presence. Others saw it as proof their freedom was gone. For a few determined artists, the fear became fuel. They held secret, candlelit concerts in basements, masked by low walls and quiet streets. Those shows carried a fragile hope that art could heal wounds deeper than any lock or patrol car. In those underground rooms, survivors sang of loss and the need to carry on. Laurel Canyon seemed changed forever after. Shared gardens wilted, and once open porches were empty. Newcomers arrived with contracts and cameras, but few carried guitars. The community that had sparked legendary music now stood guarded and wary. The shadow of Manson could not fully snuff out creativity. In locked homes and hidden studios, new songs took shape, haunted by past violence but determined to rise above it. The hills may have held grief, but they also held the stubborn spirit of artists who refused to let darkness win. Home in peril. As Laurel Canyon's music scene boomed, the cabins and cottages that once offered sanctuary began to feel fragile under new pressures. Rising fame drew curious fans and tabloid photographers to narrow canyon roads. Guests arrived unannounced, peering through windows and lingering at front gates. Musicians who once welcomed newcomers with open arms now found themselves on edge, worrying that any knock in the night could bring trouble. At the same time, property values soared. Longtime residents watched as rented homes were sold for sums they never imagined. Wealthy buyers snapped up hillside bungalows and then installed high walls and locked gates. Where artists once shared instruments and meals on low steps, they now passed through guarded entrances and security codes. The spirit of communal living gave way to private retreats. Insurance companies also took notice. After a string of late-night gatherings ended in underage drinking or accidental fires, policies for canyon homes became more expensive or impossible to find. One small cottage burned during a candlelit jam session, and the owner faced ruin when coverage was denied. Musicians who had once laughed off broken guitar strings now worried that a single spark could destroy their creative haven. Law enforcement ramped up pressure, too. Sheriff's deputies patrolled winding roads in marked cars and undercover vehicles, looking for signs of illegal activity. Rumors spread of cameras hidden in trees and license plates recorded at every intersection. Parties that once pulsed with drum beats and laughter gave way to quiet house concerts in basements or rented studios far from canyon homes. Even natural hazards took a toll. In dry summer months, embers from backyard bonfires leapt onto parched brush, creating brush fires that swept down hillsides. One photographer's home narrowly escaped when neighbors formed a bucket brigade at dawn. Another time, a sudden windstorm brought down power lines, cutting off water pumps and leaving several residents scrambling for buckets to flush toilets and water plants. Inside houses, fear crept into creative work. Songwriters described a weight on their chests as they tried to write new lyrics. Acoustic guitars sat unused for days when rainstorms knocked out electricity. Poets who once scribbled verses in cafes gathered instead in locked kitchen nooks, glancing at each other as if at any moment someone might burst through the door. Rumors of prowlers circulated often. Some residents claimed they saw dark figures slipping along back fences. Others reported strange phone calls in the early hours, with silence at the other end. Even the most trusting artists installed door sweeps and window locks, and some went so far as to carry pocket knives on late-night trips to the market. Despite the threats, many refused to abandon their homes. Jackson Brown refused buyout offers that doubled his cabin's value, preferring the company of familiar trees over a high-rise apartment. Linda Ronstadt kept her gates open to one or two trusted friends, determined to preserve a sliver of the old openness. Small gatherings continued in secret, lit by lanterns and candlelight in remote clearings, where musicians could still feel the pulse of canyon collaboration. The push and pull between privacy and community defined canyon life. Homes, once full of shared laughter, now stood silent behind high fences. Yet beneath that guarded exterior, the creative spark survived. Hidden in basement studios, echoed in whisper-soft harmonies, and carried on guitars smuggled in through back doors. Even when the world closed in, Laurel Canyon's artists found ways to keep their homes alive with music. And yet, as silence settled over the canyon, one question remained. Did the music truly end, or did it simply slip behind closed doors, waiting for someone brave enough to play it again? Fading echoes. With time, Laurel Canyon's lively gatherings faded into quiet talks among the hills. The narrow roads, once full of cars and laughter, grew empty at night. A porch that had echoed with guitars and harmonies stood silent under moonlight. Musicians moved away or settled into private studios far from curious eyes. Many original residents sold cabins to people who valued privacy over community. Studios that once hosted midnight songs became offices or locked workshops. Few dared host open jam sessions after years of rising theft and fear. A handful of die-hard artists stayed, recording songs in basement rooms. Their music carried a quiet honesty, marked by hope and regret. Modern singers visit the canyon to seek inspiration from its history. Guided tours show fans the old cabins and tell stories of the golden days. Books and films remind new listeners of the place where folk and rock met. The old spirit of free love and shared creativity lives only in memories. Benefit concerts and festivals try to capture past magic, but feel staged. No open porch sings like those first moonlit nights when chords rang free. Veteran songwriters recall how innocence gave way to guarded caution. They speak of friendships formed and lost as cabins changed hands. Security gates replaced low fences, and locked doors took the place of open arms. Still, the canyon's influence echoes in songs heard around the world. Record producers hunt for the Laurel Canyon sound in faraway studios. Artists return for retreats, hoping to catch a glimpse of the old magic. In quiet moments, a lone guitar chord seems to drift through the trees. A stray guitar pick found by the roadside reminds visitors of secret jams. Under new roofs and manicured gardens, ghostly echoes linger in the wind. The hills hold stories of sunlit mornings and nights stained by fear. Yet art lives on, carried by songs that trace their roots to canyon roads. Even as cabins stand empty or guarded, the creative spark survives unseen. Today, the canyon stands quieter, but not lifeless, its melodies echoing in the hearts of those who remember. In every chord, fading echoes find new life. Thanks for joining me on this journey through Laurel Canyon's golden highs and shadowed lows. The echoes may have faded, but the stories and the songs still linger in the hills. If you had lived there back then, what would your soundtrack have been? Drop your answer below. I'd love to hear what chords this story struck with you. See you in the next one.